Okay, so first of all, let's talk about why the government says it wants to pardon, not expunge. Because it has expunged other offences in the past, and including this year, we saw them expunge 3 historic offences that were used against Canada's gay community during the post-war years. Essentially, we saw a lot of people convicted for gross indecency. The government in that case recognized that it was a historical injustice. It was part of a kind of a purge of the civil service at the time in many cases, and in other instances people were swept up in bathhouse raids, which the government now acknowledges should not have happened. And so there's an element there of the government saying we're sorry that this happened, it shouldn't have happened, which is not the case with a pardon. In a pardon, this is the government saying we forgive you. And that's, I suppose, a distinction that might not matter that much if it had no legal consequences, but it does. Because while within Canada, a pardon and an expungement are more or less the same, really the offence does essentially go away, the conviction goes away, it isn't the same when you leave the country. When you leave the country, a pardon no longer has any validity. The original conviction still stands. And so that would affect the hundreds of thousands of Canadians who have simple possession convictions on their record and who may have difficulty, for example, crossing the border into the U.S. For them, an expungement might, but I emphasize might, eliminate that record. But even there are still some doubts. We've got to remember that there's a common database of U.S. and Canadian law enforcement called CPIC. I believe it's stored down in Texas, and it may very well be that even if the Canadian government expunged convictions, which would mean the RCMP contacting provincial, municipal authorities and so on and telling them delete this from your computers, it might still remain on that CPIC computer down in El Paso, and therefore there's no guarantee. But cost is another factor here. The cost involved in notifying all those authorities and making sure those records get deleted is greater than the cost of simply issuing a pardon, and that is probably one of the other factors that's on the
I thought it was interesting, Evan, that the NDP leader seemed to suggest that you could actually have housing or employment issues here in Canada with a pardon rather than an expungement.
Well, actually, it's illegal to discriminate against the person who's been pardoned in Canada. If a landlord says you've got a conviction and that conviction has been pardoned by the federal government and the landlord uses that to deny you an apartment, the landlord is committing an offence under the discrimination law. So I don't believe that that's an accurate statement that we heard there from Jagmeet Singh. That the real differences relate more to people who are seeking to travel than anything else. But there might also be within Canada certain very high security clearance jobs and so on, where a pardon might not be enough. It might not be as much as an expungement. I mean, after all, I guess we have to acknowledge, and perhaps this is what Jagmeet Singh was referring to, a landlord can deny you an apartment without actually telling you why they're doing it. And if a landlord is denying you an apartment for an illegal reason, such as discrimination, they're actually pretty unlikely to come clean about the real reasons for denying you the apartment. So in that sense, there's a difference, I suppose, domestically too, because an expungement literally makes the charge go away. People cannot find out about it. And that is a difference. It's very hard to discriminate against a person if you literally can't find out what they did.
All right, Evan, thank you. CBC's Evan Dyer in Ottawa.